Hey, this is Brooke, functional medicine dietitian specializing in fertility, and this is the Fertility Dietitian podcast, where I help you uncover the barriers that are preventing you from optimizing your fertility and teach you how to work with your body to finally take home a healthy baby. Each week, I will be diving into different topics on fertility and sharing my perspective on physiology, metabolic health, nutrition, and lifestyle approaches that have helped hundreds of couples get pregnant even after years of heartache. My goal is to empower you with the knowledge you need to take back control of your fertility. Happy listening. Welcome back to the Fertility Dietitian podcast. Today we're talking about IVF prep. If you are prepping for IVF, I want you to hear this before you start medications. Getting started faster does not get you to a healthy baby faster. And I know that's probably the last thing you want to hear when you've already been trying for years. But once you decide to move forward with IVF, there is so much pressure to just go get the testing done, order the medications, start with your next cycle. Because every month you wait feels like another month you are not pregnant, because it is. I get it. But after almost a decade of working with couples trying to conceive, I have worked with a lot of couples on the other side of that decision too. So, couples who have been through failed retrievals, multiple failed retrievals, who have had embryos that stopped developing, or transfers that didn't stick, or multiple rounds of IVF without a baby. And I'm typically seeing those couples after they've gone through all this IVF heartache. And one of the first things I want to know when they come to me is, what was investigated before IVF? Because IVF is an incredible tool, but IVF doesn't just fix why you're struggling to get pregnant. And that distinction matters big time. So today I want to talk about what I would do and what I would recommend. We are talking about prepping for IVF. What I would investigate first, why I want at least 3 months of preparation before medications start when you're going towards IVF, and what I would actually focus on during those 3 months. And we'll chat about the research and what it tells us around nutrition and supplements that support IVF outcomes as well. Because sometimes taking 3 months to prepare, a lot of times, most of the time, it's actually going to get you to baby faster than just jumping right into a protocol. Even though you've been trying for a long time, we want to make sure that investigation has been appropriately done and that the gaps of the conventional fertility protocol have been filled in. All right. So I want to know why we are doing IVF. Before we even talk about CoQ10 or protein or any of the fun nutrition stuff, we need to start here. Why are you doing IVF? That sounds like such an obvious question, but I cannot tell you how many couples that I've worked with who were told IVF was their next step without ever feeling like they really understood why they weren't getting pregnant in the first place. IVF is a treatment. It is not a comprehensive fertility workup. There are absolutely situations where IVF may be the best option. Severe tubal disease, severe male factor infertility, genetic condition, questions around age and ovarian reserve all make it a piece of the conversation to consider. I'm not anti IVF. I'm very pro using the right tool for the right couple. But if the explanation is essentially, you've been trying long enough and you're not pregnant, so let's do IVF, then I want to know what we are missing. Have you actually confirmed that you're ovulating well? Has thyroid function and prolactin been appropriately evaluated? What does blood sugar and insulin regulation look like? What about iron and nutrient status? Have we really evaluated the uterine environment and the fallopian tubes? What's the uterine microbiome look like? Have we thoroughly evaluated the male partner? And I don't mean someone looked at a sperm analysis or semen analysis and said it's fine. Depending on your history, we should really be considering DNA fragmentation. Okay. If you've had recurrent pregnancy losses, have they been appropriately worked up? What do your periods look like? Do you have signs of endometriosis? And have potentially they've just been dismissed for years? Or maybe infertility is your only sign of potential endometriosis. Because the goal isn't to get you just through an IVF cycle. The goal isn't even a positive pregnancy test. No, the goal is a healthy baby and a healthy mom at the end of this. And that perspective really matters. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the endometriosis piece because I see this missed or overlooked all of the time. Maybe you've been told that your horrible periods are normal, or maybe you've always had pain with sex. Maybe you have bowel symptoms around your period. Maybe you have unexplained infertility and nobody has ever really talked to you about endometriosis. Going through IVF does not make that question irrelevant. IVF may help bypass some of the fertility challenges associated with endometriosis, but it does not make endometriosis go away. It can actually make it a lot worse. Okay. And what I want to be really clear here on is because I don't want my messaging getting twisted. I'm not saying that every woman has endometriosis if they have unexplained infertility or no symptoms of endometriosis, that they have silent endometriosis, but it should be appropriately evaluated before IVF because of the risk factors in moving forward with IVF with endometriosis. Okay. This is an individualized conversation, and there's a huge difference between making an informed decision to move forward with IVF, knowing what is there and that it's part of your picture, versus never investigating it at all and having it completely impact your outcomes of IVF. Okay. You deserve to know what is happening in your body, especially before moving into a treatment that requires significant medications, procedures, time, money, and emotional energy. Okay. IVF has become so common that I think sometimes we forget it is still a medical procedure. Okay. But it's not, it is really not completely risk free. There are numerous medication side effects, procedural risks as well. And I don't say that to scare you. I say it because informed consent matters. And if you're going to put your body through IVF, let's make sure we are doing everything reasonably possible to understand your fertility first. Okay, now let's talk about the part that I know is hard, waiting. I want at least 3 months before IVF medications begin, not 3 months before transfer, but before stimulation. And I want both partners prepping. This doesn't mean you spend 3 months trying to achieve some perfect fertility lifestyle. Please don't do that to yourself. You don't need 17 supplements or perfect diet. You don't need to throw away everything in your kitchen and replace every product in your house. The point is to use this window strategically and intentionally. Eggs don't suddenly appear the day that you start stimulation. Sperm doesn't suddenly appear the day of your retrieval. These cells have been developing in the environment you created in the months leading up to IVF. And the environment is influenced by things like nutrient availability, oxidative stress, metabolic health, inflammation, sleep, alcohol, smoking, diet, and really just overall health. This is also something I have seen at play over and over again in my practice. I have had couples come to me after failed IVF cycles, spend several months working on barriers that didn't get addressed initially, and they never go back to IVF because they get pregnant without it. I have also had couples who absolutely still needed IVF or just chose to stop waiting and trying naturally and move into another IVF cycle. But when they did go back to IVF, their outcomes looked completely different, insanely improved. More eggs, better fertilization, more embryos making it to blastocyst, better quality embryos, and positive pregnancy tests and healthy babies after that first round back. That is my clinical experience. It isn't a promise that the 3 months of preparation will give everyone these results, but the more targeted we can be with you as an individual, the better the results are going to be. And after seeing this happen again and again, I cannot look at those 3 months as wasted time. I look at them as part of the treatment plan. Okay. And sometimes slowing down is what gets you to your baby faster. A lot of the time. It is. Okay. And let's talk a little bit more about food now. Okay. One of the biggest opportunities I see during IVF prep has nothing to do with an expensive supplement, it's food and specifically protein. There is a study of 120 women undergoing IVF that found something pretty interesting. Women who were getting more than 25% of their calories from protein and had substantially higher blastocyst development compared with women eating less protein. Blastocyst development was reported around 64 versus 34%, and live birth rates were 58.3% compared to 11.3%. So, pretty big deal. And when higher protein intake was combined with carbohydrate intake, below 40% of calories, clinical pregnancy rates were reported around 80%. This was a small observational study. And so I don't want you hearing those numbers and deciding tomorrow that all of a sudden, like 26% of protein is a magic number for IVF, because it might not be for you. And it doesn't mean that carbs are bad for fertility. What I think is really useful about this research is that it gets us thinking about whether you're actually eating enough protein, because I see this constantly. Coffee in the morning, maybe some oatmeal, a salad at lunch with a little bit of chicken and a handful of almonds in the afternoon. And then dinner is the first time you eat a substantial amount of protein. If that's you, this is one of the easiest places to start. Instead of obsessing over percentages, build your meals around protein. And for many women, that might look like roughly 25 to 35 grams at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then individualizing your total intake based on your body size, activity, metabolic health, and individual needs. But really start with breakfast, okay? Eggs and another protein source, for instance, Greek yogurt or cottage cheese if you're tolerating dairy, leftover meat or fish, protein smoothie. It doesn't need to be complicated. And we're always going to pair that protein with nutrient dense carbohydrates. So we call these complex carbohydrates, like our fruits, our beans, our lentils, potatoes, squash, because they are also fiber rich and rich in a lot of minerals that we need to support overall fertility. Also, carbohydrate quality does matter more than declaring overall carbs as good or bad. Okay, a larger body of fertility nutrition research supports this idea also. So, the Nurses' Health Study followed more than 17,000 women and found associations between dietary patterns and ovulatory infertility. And that research isn't an IVF trial, so we can't take these findings and say this exact diet will improve your IVF live birth rates, but it does add to something I talk about constantly. Your fertility responds to your overall environment. And if we're supporting ovulation, we're definitely supporting egg quality and that environment that those eggs are maturing in. So rather than trying to find the perfect IVF diet, ask yourself, am I eating enough? Am I getting enough protein? Am I eating omega-3 rich fish? Am I getting plants and fiber every day? Are most of my carbohydrates coming from whole food sources? Am I eating a ton of added sugar? Am I going 5 or 6 hours without eating and then crashing later? Those are things that you can actually work on. And those are all of the things that we see repeatedly supportive of fertility in the research, also, as well as IVF outcomes. Okay. In addition to making sure we're getting enough in, emphasizing protein, not skimping on carbs, we can fill in some gaps and really support the process of IVF with supplements. So, this is probably part that everyone wants to just jump right into. But supplements are not a quick fix. Okay. So always remember that they are actually supplementing what you are already doing in your foundation. So you're probably wondering, what supplements should I take before IVF? I want to flip that question though. Instead of asking, what are the best IVF supplements? Ask, what does your body need? Because more supplements does not necessarily equal better fertility. That being said, there are a few that have some interesting research behind them. So, CoQ10 is probably one of the most talked about supplements. It is involved in mitochondrial energy production, and eggs are incredibly energy demanding cells. So, we see this over and over in the research. CoQ10 is very supportive of IVF outcomes. Okay. So, it's associated with more retrieved eggs, more optimal embryos, higher clinical pregnancy rates, and fewer canceled cycles. Okay. And interestingly enough, CoQ10 is something I think is worth discussing with your dietitian, your fertility dietitian, especially if you have diminished ovarian reserve or if you've had poor response to IVF in the past. And something I want you to notice with CoQ10 is that it is recommended before IVF. Okay, a minimum of 3 months prior to IVF because it's going to really get in there and support those follicles that the medications are meant to mature much more rapidly than your natural cycle, right? So, the goal of the stimulation cycle is to get more cycles on board so they can retrieve more eggs, hopefully, get more embryos from that too. So, starting ahead of time, months ahead of time, allows more of those follicles to get the benefit of that CoQ10 support and really supporting that mitochondrial energy along the way. Okay. Then we have melatonin. Most people hear melatonin and think sleep, but melatonin actually functions as an antioxidant also. And research in women undergoing IVF has found improvements in things like mature oocytes, fertilization, embryo quality, and clinical pregnancy as well, which all matters and makes a big difference in outcomes for getting that baby, too. I also don't automatically recommend melatonin to every client. You need to really think about your own situation, and a lower dose is actually better. So, 3 milligrams to 5 milligrams is where we're sitting with melatonin. We can definitely overdo it. Supporting that overall natural sleep circadian rhythm cycle is really important too, because it can actually boost your own melatonin production as well. And then there is NAC, or N-acetylcysteine. NAC supports glutathione, which is one of the body's major antioxidant systems. So there's some research suggesting it may support egg and embryo quality in certain populations, including women of advanced reproductive age. But when we look at NAC research overall, it's helpful and supportive. So prep time is really when you want to be using that. And again, it's not something for everyone, but it can be a really helpful option to consider. And then we have vitamin C. Vitamin C is important. I absolutely want you getting vitamin C. More isn't automatically better, but we do see improved outcomes in IVF. Vitamin C itself is an antioxidant. Okay. So we see that higher dose, around like 600 milligrams, actually see improvements in implantation and clinical pregnancy rates if that vitamin C supplementation was started before the IVF cycle started. So you can take CoQ10, NAC, melatonin, vitamin C, every other antioxidant you want, and still be missing the biggest fertility barriers in your body. So we don't want to use the supplements as band aids. We want to use them as actual supplements of our foundation that we are also working on. Okay. So if your fasting insulin is high, or your ferritin is low, or you're not eating enough, maybe you're sleeping like 6 hours a night, and nobody has investigated endometriosis, but you've had some symptoms for years. Maybe your partner had one basic semen analysis 3 years ago, and that was the end of the fertility workup. We need to start there because those are going to be the heavier hitters, not the supplements. Okay. And yes, your partner does need to do prep as well. Okay. You cannot do IVF prep on your own. And I can't put this episode out without also talking about partner prep. Also, IVF prep is not just women's prep, it is couples prep. Half of the genetic material in the embryo is coming from the sperm. So if you have 3 months or more before IVF, I want both of you using those 3 months strategically, looking at nutrition and sleep and alcohol intake, stopping the tobacco and the marijuana, getting rid of heat exposure, supporting metabolic health, considering medications that he's on that might be impacting sperm health, also looking at nutrient status and semen parameters, including DNA fragmentation too, because those can be changed. And we cannot see what sperm have a lot of DNA fragmentation in a petri dish under that microscope that they're using. So they can weed out abnormal shaped or the ones that are not swimming well, but they can't see the fragmented DNA, which is absolutely going to impact number of embryos that make it to blast, and the continued division of that embryo once it is able to be transferred and hopefully implanted. So, higher DNA fragmentation leads to higher risk of miscarriage. It doesn't just impact the conception in the first place. So, it's a really big deal. All right. I don't want the woman spending 3 months changing every detail of her life while her partner is told to show up on retrieval day. We can do so much better than that for getting that healthy baby in your arms sooner and helping you have a healthy pregnancy because his sperm absolutely impacts placental development and so many risk factors during pregnancy, as well as the lifelong health of your future tiny human. So it is a big, big deal. Okay. All right. So what would I actually do if I was planning IVF and I had 3 months before my medications began? This is where I would start. Number one, I would understand why we are doing IVF in the first place. Okay. I would ask what barriers have been found and if I'm being gaslit or told that there's nowhere else to look, I would find additional support and making sure that we're investigating both the uterine and gut microbiome, mineral status, as well as having my labs that have already been done evaluated for a different perspective because there are so many gaps in the conventional fertility protocol. Okay. Number two, I would investigate the things that have been missed. Okay. So if you have symptoms of endometriosis, talk about them. If you've had recurrent losses, make sure that you have been appropriately evaluated. If you've had failed IVF cycles, don't automatically repeat the same exact thing without asking what we learned from that cycle. And if they just say you just have bad quality eggs, that's not a good answer. Okay. We can change egg quality, we can change sperm quality, we can improve that uterine microbiome. So, just jumping into another round of IVF is absolutely not the answer there. And we need more investigation to better support your body. Okay. Number three, we want to evaluate both partners. Okay. Both of them fully. Number four, getting the food foundation in place. You want to eat enough. Eat meaningful protein at every meal, high quality that's bioavailable. So that's largely animal protein. Eating omega-3 rich seafood 2 or 3 times a week. Eating plenty of colorful plants and fiber, building meals that support stable blood sugar, which really goes back to that fiber and protein also, but not skimping on carbs either. It's all about the balance. Reducing added sugar and heavily processed foods. And please don't crash diet before IVF, okay? We want your body feeling really nourished and safe in order to produce many high quality eggs that are going to help create those high quality embryos. Number five, look at your actual nutrient status. Okay. Your prenatal is important, but taking a prenatal doesn't automatically mean you have adequate nutrient stores. All right. We can go much deeper there and get much more individualized with that. Number six, prioritize sleep. 7 hours is better than 5, 8 is better than 6. You do not need a perfect bedtime routine, but prioritize it. Start by giving yourself enough opportunity to sleep. Number seven, individualize your supplements. CoQ10 may make sense. NAC might make sense. Melatonin might make sense. Vitamin C might make sense. But I want a reason for everything you're taking. And finally, give your body time to respond. You are not wasting time. I want to end here because this is the part I think so many women need to hear. If you decide to take 3 months or more to prep for IVF, you are not doing nothing. You are not just waiting. You're not falling behind. You're using that time. You're investigating why you're struggling to conceive. You're correcting deficiencies, improving metabolic health. You're working on eating enough protein and supporting egg and sperm health. You're addressing the things that may have been overlooked, and you're giving your body the raw materials it needs before asking it to go through something incredibly demanding. I have worked with couples who came to me convinced IVF was their only option because that is what they were told. But some never went back because they conceived during the process of working on their health. Others did go back and their next round looked completely different. Both are wins because I'm not interested in proving that you can get pregnant naturally. I'm interested in helping you get your healthy baby. Sometimes IVF is part of the story, sometimes it isn't. But IVF and preconception care should never be treated like opposites. You can use reproductive technology and support the biology behind your fertility. So if IVF is on the calendar, resist the urge to race to the starting line just because you're desperate to get to the finish line. When it is medically appropriate, take more time than 3 months. Ask better questions. Investigate what hasn't been investigated. This typically means adding to your support team. Get both partners involved. Feed your body well, correct what needs correcting, and go into IVF knowing that you have done everything reasonably within your control to get that cycle the strongest starting point possible. Sometimes taking the time to prepare is exactly what gets you to your healthy baby faster. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fertility Dietitian podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review to let me know what topics you want more of or less of. If you want to keep learning, subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out my website for more info on my private coaching program, Master Your Fertility, or my membership community, Fertility Blueprint. And don't forget my digital store. Come say hi on YouTube and Instagram. See you in the next episode.